Hi there, I'm Kraig Kann. Right now, on this edition of Tracks to Success, meet a man whose face and voice is synonymous with SportsCenter. 25 years on the desk at ESPN, making his name and his fame from thousands of shows before retiring in 2024. And if you didn't see him there, perhaps it was here as the host of the reality show Wipeout. But he's far from done and hardly looking back. A master in media, he's ready to really pay it forward. His name is John Anderson. His climb from Columbia, Missouri, and the reasons he's heading back. An inspiring story of success starts now.
Welcome to Tracks to Success. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories, how they found their way to the top, and how their path can help you do the same. Here's your host, network broadcaster, C-suite executive, best-selling author, speaker, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
Where do I even begin with you? This is fabulous. I'm really glad to have you a part of this podcast, Tracks to Success. John Anderson, how are you, my friend? How are you?
I'm good, man. Who's the guy that said I'm tan, rested, and ready? I don't know what, but I'm all those things.
Okay, good. Then why don't we start with this? Did you have a routine, like a pre-show routine at ESPN, like when you were walking down the hall, to get ready for the show, something you did every time?
Not really. I'm trying to think. I did certain things, I wanted to be written by X, an hour beforehand. And then I always, some people went to their office and changed. I always brought my clothes with me, went to the dressing room. Probably the only thing I made sure I always did is if I'd go to the cafeteria, which we did at least once a night, whether it was for dinner or for a snack or a Coke or whatever. There are pictures. There was a picture of John Saunders. And there was pictures of Stuart Scott in different places. And so I always made sure when I went by that I kind of tapped those things for good luck. Stuart was always great. And then John was just a wonderful mentor to a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And that was about it. I didn't wear the same socks. I didn't take the same route every day to the studio. I didn't have anything quite like that, which is too bad because I'm kind of a believer in some of those superstitions, right?
Yeah.
Like if I hit it good, man, I'm wearing the same shirt the next time I go out to play golf and some of those other things. But sports are not so much.
Yeah, we'll get into golf. I know you love the sport. So the follow-up is now kind of ruined because I was going to say, did you use that same routine before you came on this show? Like I wanted to make sure, because see, when I get onto an airplane, I tap the side of the airplane the same way every time. I do it every time.
Right.
So I just wanted to know if there was anything special that you did for this aside from put a Wisconsin Badgers helmet back there in the package. I'm glad your name's up there in the back so I know who you are.
Yeah, this is again. So this is where I do our little Inside Wisconsin podcast, which is just what the name says it is. It's about Wisconsin. So I have many Wisconsin totems behind me, including Andy North, and whether that was no matter what you did, as long as you have a picture of Andy North, I feel like I should actually have a candle there maybe too, and some other thing. Titleist, I think. Well, actually, he might be a TaylorMade guy. Whatever, and light that beforehand. But other than that, it's just a bunch of Wisconsin stuff, and then the guy I do it with, he put up like some soapbox derby trophy or something he had, and he was really, and so I just one day I put a bunch of these out just to flex. Otherwise, they literally haven't been seen in forever.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got the Packers. I mean, I have my Bears helmet behind me. By the way, the Missouri helmet is on the other side, okay, which we'll get into as well. I thought.
By the way, I'm looking at. I want you to know, I'm looking at from here. I can see 4 Missouri helmets, and then as a kid in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Just below here, my favorite player, and it got me in huge trouble as a kid, was Walter Payton. So I have a signed Walter Payton jersey right over here, and I have a Gale Sayers signed helmet. So I love those two guys. And the Sayers thing is terrible, right? Because he went to KU, so that's awful. And then I grew up, so I have some Bears stuff, and I can be free with that with you, knowing your background. But other people, I kind of have to keep that deep in the closet.
Hey, listen, the Packers have great uniforms. I have my Bears helmet back there that I paid a lot of money for, signed by Justin Fields. How's that working out for me right now? Not really well. The cool thing is that it's the orange helmet. I like that. But
Oh,
anyway,
what'd you pay
okay.
for I paid nothing for a Peter Tom Willis helmet. Did you have one of those? I can just send that to you if you want it.
I paid way too much. And what I found out afterwards, I was the first guy to put the name up at the top of the whole thing. And
Oh.
then like a week later, or 2 weeks later, I get the phone call, you won. And I'm like, what, did nobody else? Clearly nobody else wanted it. And so now I
Oh,
guess I'm going to go to some charity event in Pittsburgh. I'll try to pick one of those up too.
yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about, I don't want to bury the lead here. And you're a guy who's written a whole lot of leads. I have a few that I could use. 25 years at SportsCenter. John Anderson calls it a career. That could be one.
Yeah.
Anderson, 25 years at ESPN, but roaring into a new chapter at his alma mater. We could go with that one.
Yeah.
Anderson retires, goes to the Olympics to cover track and field.
Good.
Now on a new fast track in his career.
Whoa,
I mean,
like
you give me a lead. I don't know what to use here. What's the biggest thing that we all need to know about John Anderson right now?
Wow. Retire seems a little strong. Retired from SportsCenter is probably accurate. I won't be doing that show anymore. But retired in the sense of that I'm literally going to go start planting a garden. Which, by the way, is great. My dad did that. I'm not trying to get down on gardeners, or spend my time at the golf course, or take up croquet, or knitting, or write the next great American novel is probably not true. I feel like part of the reason I left SportsCenter was all, in addition to, the things I've said, like it's a long time to do the show and I'm really tired and all that other stuff, is that I have some other things I'd like to do. And I need some space and time to do that, right? It's the only thing. I'm like Jim Nance. You can't buy time, my friend. It's currency.
No.
And so I want to, one, get around and see my kids before they're entirely out of college and enjoy some of those things with them. So I've got that on the horizon. Then in terms of actual work, I still get to do all the track and field that I loved. So I get to keep my hand or my foot or my spikes, whatever, in that. I wanted to go to the Olympics. Last time I did that in Tokyo, that took I came back from Tokyo and literally worked the next day. And then this opportunity that kind of arose to teach, which had always been on my radar, which is something I'd been trying to prepare for over the last 3, 4, 5 years with that in mind. And so I wanted to explore that, and then it sort of jumped up and got here quicker than I had thought. So I just have a bunch of other things that I'd really like to do. And though not a novel, I do have a couple of other ideas that I think could work in the entertainment industry. So we'll
tease.
see.
Nice tease. Well done. Okay. You mentioned a bunch of things there, which we're going to cover here in our conversation. I want to talk about 2 meetings. All right. Let's start with this one. The meeting where you got the gig at ESPN, like when you got the call and you're like, whoa, I've worked my way up. I'm going to ESPN. What was that like?
It was unexpected in that I had been contemplating 2 other jobs. I interviewed at ESPN about 6 months before they hired me, which is a long leg time, as you know. And I had gone there. I had this appointment, and here's everybody will make their excuses why they were terrible. But my grandmother, who I was extremely close to and was really helpful in raising me with my mom after my father passed away when I was young, had just died. And I had been there to see her. I knew she was ill, and I went to see her because at the time I was in Phoenix and I didn't have a ton of money. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to see her once. I'd like to see her to say goodbye rather than the funeral. Anyway, so I went, and I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have gone to the interview. But how do you tell ESPN, no, you've had this lined up for a month and a half, and now I can't come? So I went, and I was admittedly just kind of so in my my interview. I thought was fine, but on air, just the whole thing was not great. And so I hadn't heard from him in the interim. I interviewed much better at CNNSI. Remember that was a thing.
Yeah.
And then at a station in my hometown in Green Bay. and both offered me jobs. So I was discussing with my wife, what are we going to do? And we were actually on a ski trip with a buddy of mine, and my agent calls and says, all right, we got to have a decision this morning. I said, okay, we're going to go to Atlanta. You know this. It's easier to find a job with CNN on your resume than it is WB whatever in Wisconsin. And so we're going to do that, even though the money wasn't great. And he goes, actually, no, you're going to go to ESPN. And I'm like, what happened? And my agent had made one last call and said to Al Jaffe at the time, who was hiring, and said, listen, you're about to lose John Anderson to CNN, and I don't think you want that. And at that time, they did have a spot, and so they brought me on board. And when he told me, I was like, wow, okay, let's go. And you can appreciate this because when we went to school together, ESPN wasn't a thing. I don't know any of us that thought, oh, I want to go to ESPN because they were showing cross-country meets. They were showing lumberjack competitions. SportsCenter wasn't a thing. So nobody, like the kids now, I don't know, maybe now, but during his prime, they all wanted to grow up and go to ESPN. And I don't think any of us had that in our radar.
Well, there were some people in our class that were good play-by-play lumberjack guys.
Yeah, sure. And or how to scale a tree and all that other stuff. Yeah, logging.
Right.
But by that time, it was a deal. And they're like, you're going to come in on ESPN News. I'm like, that's fine. I don't care. Where do you take me? So at that point, I was really exhilarated, really thrilled. And then the other thing that really came across my mind is that all the time when you are working your way up in sports departments and local news is you do most everything. You're shooting, you're writing, you're editing, you're doing the weekend, you're filling in on a weekday, you're doing a live report, you're doing all these things. And all of a sudden I turned to my wife and said, I think I'm an anchor now. Like I'm full-time talent right? Like I'm not ever going to have to pick up a camera again. I'm going to have a schedule. It's not going to be like, hey, yeah, you're the week guy. You're the week, this week you're on. And then the week, I'm like, I think I'm an anchor now. And that was, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I got to make sure I know what I'm doing there.
It's funny you say that because when I was in local working my way up before Golf Channel, I shot, edited, wrote, did everything and loved shooting video. I loved it. To this day, I can't even take a picture on my phone without going, all right, let's make sure we got this in the foreground. Let's be creative with this. My kids are like, Dad, why is everything angled? What are you doing? But I have that in me and it's never gone. And then I got to Golf Channel and I was like, you need to shoot it. They're like, hey, stop.
Yeah.
You're the talent. You let me do the shooting.
You'd come back and you'd like, where's that picture? And you're like, what one? I'm like, well, I saw we had the camera. I'm assuming that was what was in the lens. Like I was going to write to that picture and it's not there. So it's crazy.
It is. Okay. So that's kind of a euphoric moment. I know exactly what you're feeling. Now take me to the meeting or how it happened when you said, or maybe it was your agent who did it, but I'm done. 25 years is a long time. And I'm going to step aside. I mean, there's a lot of emotion there, I'm guessing, tied to family and decisions and career, et cetera. What was that like?
That was easier than you might expect, only because 2 years prior to that, I had thought about getting out when my youngest daughter, my youngest child was graduating high school. And I thought, boy, my contract is out. That's perfect. In fact, when they were downsizing and doing some things, my contract somehow had gotten off. My start date and my contract renewal date were 6 months apart. So I'm the only guy ever that once said, like, can I get a 3.5 year contract? Instead of 3 or 4, I need 3.5 in a day. Yeah. And so I had it in mind that's what I would do. And then the pandemic hit, and that just kind of changed everything a little bit. And so I had gone in 2 years earlier, and I said to my boss, listen, I can't do this anymore 200 nights a year. Can we scale back some of this somehow? So we swung a deal where I was only doing 90 to 100 shows and the track. So I'd already kind of eased my way out. I knew it was coming. I had planned for it. I was ready to go. So when I went in to see him, the guy, he's been in the news a lot, named Norby Williamson, who over 25 years there was really good to me. I know people had some issues with him. He can be a hard guy. But anyway, so I went and I said, Norby, I am done. And I said, I am not one of these people that is done because I'm mad at somebody. I'm not one of these people that's done because I haven't gotten enough money. I'm not one of these people that's dumb because I didn't get to go to this or that. I said, I'm just done. I've had 25 years. This place has been great. You helped me build a house. You helped me put my kids through school. Like, I'm good. I can never do for ESPN what the four letters have done behind my name. Like, if people have a brand, that's my brand, right? I don't have, I'm not the coach. I'm not the wild guy. I'm just, ESPN's my good brand. And I just said, I can't. And he said, I get it. I know we had talked about this. The only thing he said is, he said, can I talk you out of it? I said, nope. He said, okay, won't try. He said, I just feel bad that I've lost a guy that's kind of trusted, that knows how to do the show. And then I said, but now that I've had my cake and I eat it, can I do the track? And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I love to do that. And I said, near as I can tell, I said, I think I know my way around it pretty good, but I also know that there's not a line to do it and you don't have anybody in line. Yeah. And I said, so we can help each other out. And that's when he said, well, we just signed the NCAA contract for 8 years. You want them all, or you want to come back in 4? And I said, I'll come back in 4. I said, by that time, I'll campaign for my kid to do them. And so that's how it was. So it was really great. And he was awesome. And the number of people who were thrilled for me, Kraig, I can't tell you. And I hope it's not because, like, thank God we're getting rid of this guy. But so many people have had so many kind of tough endings at ESPN over the last 7-8 years. So many have had tough endings. And that I actually got to say what I wanted to do, worked out really well. And then knock on wood about timing in life. What was it? 3 weeks later, less than that, a month, whatever. It wasn't long. It was certainly less than a month. Norby left the company. And I'm like, what if I had not gone in on that day and I had gotten someone that I didn't know for 25 years? Like, would they have said, great, go, leave tomorrow. We'll find somebody to do the track. Luckily, I had the paperwork. He had done it. Like, I went and saw him in February, right? I didn't end until middle of the summer. So I went and saw him in February. So we knew what was going on. And so it was great. And I haven't literally rooted even once.
Wow.
Sometimes people go, God, like the first time you go, September comes, you don't have to go back to school for the first time. You're like, wait, I should be going to, like, I haven't had one moment of that. Like, wow, it's 4:00. You need to go into the show. Or every once in a while I go, it's midnight. Why am I still up and awake? Because I haven't shaken that schedule yet. But so, yeah, the first one was exhilarating. And the other one is, and I think you've seen this enough in guys, golf, it's hugely apparent that you cover. You don't really see the pressure until it's off. And then you see the relief, right? You see Tiger Woods break down at the British Open, or you see Rory take that hat off that one time, right? Like, they're going through and they're doing all this, and you never see the pressure until it's off, and you go, oh, there's really, and then, so I kind of had that until I got out of there. Then I went, wow, that is great. What a load off. And I had a big moment of that. A lot of people
do not get to leave on their own terms in television, in media, period. It just doesn't work out that way. Somebody gets pushed, somebody gets cut, somebody that. You got to kind of call your
And maybe
own
I'm
shot,
fooling
so
myself. Maybe if I'd have said, hey, I think now I need to stay 2 years, he would have said, well, actually, no, we were counting on you leaving. So my story is that I was able to leave on my own terms as more people kind of meet untimely ends. So I hope that's true. But if it's not, at least that's how I get to tell it, because that's how it happened. If it had been, if I had gone and said, how about 4 more years? And they might have very well said no. So,
okay.
I like how the version ends here.
A quick minute to welcome a partner to the podcast and tell you about a great deal just for you. Here's a question. Do you wear hats? Of course you do. Then you need to know about Ahead. Ahead doesn't follow the trends, they set them, providing the best in headwear, styles, fabrications, and ornamentations for 25 years. And by listening to this podcast, you get a chance to save big. Visit aheadusashop.com and use the code TTS, that's Tracks to Success, to receive 20% off your order. That's aheadusashop.com and use the exclusive code TTS, 20% off, just for listening. let's talk about the journey. And you go back to childhood. You mentioned Gale Sayers. By the way, I'm a Chicago guy, Bears fan, but I actually really liked the Vikings when I was a kid. I loved the purple, and Chuck Foreman. I had a poster of him on my wall. But I like the number 44. I had George Gervin too.
Yeah. By the way, still the greatest poster ever. Every time somebody says
on the ice cube.
Everybody says that's a posterized dunk. And I did that one time on SportsCenter for a lead. And I just said, I'm tired of these posterizing. Here's the only basketball poster you'll ever need. And he's in his sweatsuit and he's got the ball. Like, this is the only basketball poster anybody should ever have. It's the only one.
And I always wanted number 44, and I would shoot, how I shot with the side, and I would do that. But like, I wasn't as skinny as George Gervin.
No.
So I didn't look as good in a 44 jersey. My fours were stretched, a little bit. I didn't look like I could do the finger roll and all that stuff. Sure. Okay. Let's talk about the journey. I had Mike Tirico on this program once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
And Tirico was talking about when he was a kid, he would walk around with spoons as microphones like that. Yeah. And he wanted to do that when he was a kid. I, at 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, was in my home in Chicago, making up my own games. Parents gave me a tape recorder and a microphone. That's all I ever wanted to be. By the way, great orange shag carpeting in that room with the Foreman poster and the Gervin poster. But that's what I did. What did you do when you were a kid? Did you know this is what you wanted to do? Did you want to be an anchor of sports?
Not quite like that. No, I didn't go around like that. I didn't broadcast games. I was more of a stat geek. Like, if they had sabermetrics, if they had analytics when I was a kid, that's totally where I would have been. I was a numbers guy. I would score the All-Star game. Somewhere I still have a scorebook where there's probably 4 or 5 All-Star games. Like, I have scored Fred Lynn's only Grand Slam home run off Atlee Hammaker in the comfort of my home.
Was Dan Issel in that All-Star game that you were doing? Dan Issel, was he in that?
No, Dan Issel played for the Nuggets. He was a basketball player.
Yeah, I know, but you said you're talking about baseball All-Star game. See, I immediately went NBA.
No,
sorry.
Baseball All-Star game with that's, like I said, Fred Lynn hit it off Atlee Hammaker, the Giants.
Yeah.
All those things. Every Sunday when the Agate page came out, kids, if you don't have a newspaper, you're missing a great thing in life with the Agate page of every batting average that was a guy who had qualified, every ERA, the team batting. And I'd copy down all my favorite Brewers and what they were doing. So I did all that kind of stuff. And I ran in school. And when I wasn't running, I was a manager. So I was either, scoring basketball games or cleaning basketballs, or I was or I was taping ankles the year that I didn't run cross country because I didn't think that was going to be good for high jumping. And so, but then I was when I looked at colleges, I looked at Iowa for athletic training, I looked at Wisconsin for kind of mathematics stuff, and I looked at Missouri for journalism, but only because I had watched the guys. I did find myself constantly watching every local guy on TV. And I can, like, people go, do you have people that you looked up to? I'd name them, you'd never heard any of them because they were local Green Bay guys. Some went on to great things, and some didn't. But anyway, so I knew all those guys, and I'd flick around to watch all of them. And I said, as I was going through, I said to my parents, well, I feel like I could do that. I would like to do that. And they said, well, I think then you need to go into journalism school. And so that's when I put Missouri on the hook.
Wow.
But I didn't go around calling games and stuff. But and to this day, I still like to make numbers kind of juggle and dance and see what you can come up with.
Cool.
To make sense of things.
So I'm going to do a little tribute here because we both, for all those out there, just so everybody knows, let's come clean on this. John and I went to school together. He was 1 year ahead of me. He was my teaching assistant. We worked together. We've been friends for a long time. We're diehard Mizzou guys, although he apparently likes the Badgers too. That's fine. Yeah. But I'm going to pay a tribute to Kent Collins. Now, people out there don't know who Kent Collins is. You and I do. He was a mentor, a legend at the Missouri Journalism School in the broadcast discipline. And he had a quote that he would say that maybe you remember. I know I do. And I share it in all of my keynotes and talks that I do and so forth. You can't preach to anybody unless you get them into the church. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what he would say about better put your best video first, better put your best interview first. You better in your news story on the local news that night or sports story, you better have your best stuff at the top. That was big to me. And what I would say about your career is that you preached really well, You're a great storyteller. You've got wit. You've got a lot of different things attached to you, but you're able to get people into your church. You were able to attract an audience by being you. So you talked about brand earlier. What would you say about that? No matter what you are doing in your career, getting people to buy in, so to speak.
Yeah, I am. It's the old John Butchie-Gross. I don't know that it is Butchie's holy, or he borrowed it, entirely. But when he said, if you can fake sincerity, then you've got it made. Um, but I do think there's something about just being who you are. And I think people can detect that. The thing I tell people all the time is I hope if someday they meet me at the gas station or the grocery store or at a stadium, they'd go, yeah, that's exactly how I thought he'd be from watching him on TV.
Yeah.
The thing about Stuart Scott, right? And you watch all that stuff, is Stuart was like that when you saw him. If you see Kenny Mayne, he is absolutely that deranged when you meet him, right? He is that guy. John Butchie-Gross loves hockey and will talk to you about hockey. All those guys. Rhys Davis is the guy you see on TV. And I've thought about that. Most of the people that I know that were successful there, whether you like them or not, right? I don't know, the Q rating, yay, but whether it's, but because some people didn't get Stuart, some people don't get Kenny, whatever. But that's who those people were. We have a lot of people on there, or I've seen through the years come through, whether it was SportsCenter or ESPN News didn't make it. They did whatever they kind of thought the SportsCenter anchor should be, or a TV anchor. It doesn't even have to be sports. They thought this is what it should be. I'm going to talk like this, and I think people get that. And so that was the first thing, is like, just be who I am. So if you said something about, one time there was a guy who went down, he made a diving catch, and he came up and he was just caked. His whole thing was grass stained. I think it was a Dodger, because it was such a pristine white. And I just thought, wow, your mom is going to have a hard time getting those grass stains out of your uniform, and you're probably going to get yelled at when you get home tonight. Because that was sort of like what my mom would do. And I think, and it just kind of came out, and that's what it was. But I think if you had that kind of stuff is where to start. And then you can build up from there. And then to getting him into the church, like I've always thought, whether it was a package or a 20-second VO to make TV talk, just a short thing, like it's got to have a lead. It better have a first line that makes me want to watch. Kraig Kann and John Anderson did a podcast today. Okay. I doesn't excite me.
No interest. Right.
Right. But just like the lines you said at the top, like, give me that. Give me one of those. John Anderson has left SportsCenter so that he can get on the fast track to the Olympics, or I'm paraphrasing. I think
sure.
But like, I remember that. Like, I remember people who have great lead. Rhys Davis one time said, from Gilligan to Gulliver to John Morant, men have always loved to travel. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm watching whatever you have to say.
Yeah.
From Gilligan to Gulliver to the Grizzlies, because he hit the G again. The Grizzlies, John Morant, men have always loved to travel. Like, tell me that's not just, like, that should be in the Lead Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'm in the church now. I'm listening to what you have to say, whatever comes next.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, team and individual workshops, mind-altering virtual programs. To learn more and to find out why the Elevate workshop has been labeled the most powerful experience in leadership communication, visit cannadvisory.com. And when you do connect, mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the interview.
Talking with John Anderson, 25 years at ESPN. You just brought up the names Stuart Scott, Kenny Mayne. You talked about being yourself. At the same time, differentiation is what made them unique and successful.
Correct.
What was your differentiator? Can't just be that you were the likable guy who was just trying to be himself.
I don't know. I think one is literally, I don't know that there's a ton of people that brought a Midwestern sensibility to it. Like Levy and I always would laugh that everything west of Philadelphia to him was one state until he got to Vegas. Um, that was our running joke. Anderson, you're from Wisconsin. I am. Anderson, aren't you from Missouri? I went to school there. Anderson, you're from Iowa. Right, I was born there. So those were the cores. But then it'd be like, aren't you from Indiana? No, it's Iowa. Right, same thing. You're from Minnesota. Wrong side of the river. Nobody cares, right? Like that was the running. I was from Indiana and Ohio and just name it. And in those Nebraska, he was. And then everyone's like, "Go, you're from Kansas." I'm like, that we don't play with.
No.
I put the kibosh to him. And so there, some of it was that, and then some of it I always like to think, or I hoped, that I just tried to look at things a little different without losing what the main focus was, right? Like you can get a little too in the weeds. You said earlier, you don't want to bury the lead. Okay, I don't want to bury the lead, but if I can do it differently, and the example I use is it came from a place when I was very young, and I was actually not even on air, but the guy I was working for was, and I was cutting his kicker for the 5 o'clock show, right? They need a little something to make banter talk on. Sure. And so it was just, we're searching and we find whoever it was, Eddie Delahousse, he was probably dead, some jockey at Santa Anita, and he rides a record number of winners at the meeting, whatever it is, 208. Okay, so we cut the thing. And he gets done, his name was John Walls, and he looks at the anchor who shall remain nameless, and he said, boy, what a jockey. And she turned to him and she goes, what a horse. Thinking maybe the horse had won all 200. But ever since then, I've thought to myself, but what about the horse? Like, does the horse know that he's in a race? Does the horse know he's carrying this jockey to? And so I've always kind of thought to myself, what a horse, whether it was any other thing. Here we are at the Super Bowl, When else do you use Roman numerals? Well, like my grandfather clock, the Super Bowl, and like very few places. Okay, so, is there something to play off that? When they did the national anthem controversy started with the whole thing with Colin Kaepernick and all these other things. Like I remember, and so now you go search because you think, well, do I remember this? And you're a Viking guy. Bud Grant on the first day of training camp used to have national anthem practice where he got his guys out and stood them on the line and they put their helmet under their arm and they stood for the national anthem.
Imagine that today.
So, yeah, which is, again, I'm not trying to fall on either one of them. I'm just saying that, like, this has been kind of a thing that's been out there here and there. You and I have been around enough to know all the time. You get a young kid, 22, 23, and you don't want to kill their enthusiasm, and they'll go like, this is the greatest double play I've ever seen. I'm like, I've been sitting here for 25 years. Unless somebody's head fell off, I've watched Ozzie Smith. I don't know that this is, but I'm great for you. Let's see what it is. Yeah, and I try to share the enthusiasm, but you're kind of going, again, did his arm go with the ball? I've seen the glove go. And so we go that. So I always tried to look at it a little different and write it a little different than other people. And so if I tell people if I've succeeded anywhere, I'd like to think I was success, or at least if I've done anything that helped me keep a job for 25 years, is that every word I sweated over. And I tried to make sure every word was the right word and write it a little different and a little better than other folks. Didn't always accomplish that, right? Every once in a while you use the wrong word. Every once in a while you say the wrong thing. But, that's 25 years. You're gonna hit one of those potholes once in a while.
Write like you speak. Don't speak like it's written. This. I teach at the Dan Patrick, there's a name for you, School of Sportscasting, once a month in Orlando, paying it forward to Full Sail University. I've got my own business, Can Broadcast Talent Coaching, working with young people. I love paying it forward. And the written word is something that a lot of people, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, but, people don't write anymore. They don't write letters anymore. They don't spend a lot of time writing. I mean, gosh, if I said to my kids today, who would probably never write a letter, hey, call 911. Call. How about I just text? They're not going to do it that way. Everything is different, but the writing is such a valuable tool in everything that we do. And you are known for that. You just talked about 25 years. And I keep thinking to myself, You mentioned the horse, getting back on the horse and doing all those shows and then trying to get it down to a manageable number of 90. So let's talk about that for a second. Wife and 2 kids, right? How did you balance it? How difficult was that? I've lived it myself. I want your version of that.
Wife and I and 2 kids, and then I have a daughter, a third child who is from a relationship in Tulsa, who's, by the way, killing it right now in Illinois, working for Governor Pritzker. How do we balance it? One, my wife is great. She did not work. She chose to stay and help raise her kids, which is invaluable. That may sound sort of corn pone, and it's not like she had a sundress, pearls, and an apron on, like Leave It to Beaver. But she found working, doing stuff for the children, and then working in and around their environments for schools and all those other things was helpful. So that was the first big deal. Then there were a lot of times when they both needed to go somewhere where I just, got up after 3 hours of sleep and then went back to bed. And then you just kind of pick your spots and what you do. The nice thing about having ESPN behind your name is that every once in a while you get opportunities to do stuff. There's a great story of Harry Truman, the former president, and Independence, Missouri, which is why I know, because he was American. But somebody said, Mr. President Truman, they want you to come speak. This was after he was done. And he said, they don't want Harry Truman. They want the president. They don't want Harry Truman. They want the guy who dropped the bomb. Same thing. They don't always want John Anderson, but they would like the SportsCenter guy who can tell them about Chris Berman, and they can tell you. So those opportunities come. And so then you just kind of pick the ones that you wanted to pick. My golf game suffered. And then when I did Wipeout, I made a commitment with my wife, like, I just won't do anything else. I will not pick up any other side gigs. I won't do any of that stuff. But I was lucky. Like I said, I lost one father, and then when my mom remarried, I got the greatest stepdad in the history of the world. And he was there. So I liked to do that, and I wanted to be around. And so some of that is then you just make the effort. You just don't go, well, I'm tired, I'll lay in bed. Sometimes you get up, when we have vacation, let's go do that. I'm not going to use my vacation time or 3 days because, for a while you only have two weeks. Sometimes it's 3 that I can't be spending days that aren't with those people. And then we went back a lot of places. You were in Orlando. Like we spent a lot of money on the airlines going to Oklahoma and to Wisconsin to see family because we couldn't just drop them at the grandparents' house for a movie night.
Right. Right.
So some of that is just, you just got to decide if it's important to you, and it is, and it was,
Yeah. You did a good job of it, because nobody has a 25-year career if they don't do a good job of it. I don't want to make this too rapid fire, but I want to be able to make it tighter and see where we go with this. All right. What do you you just mentioned it. What do you recognize more for? This is SportsCenter, the commercial series, or Wipeout on ABC, the reality show, which you were great on both. And you're in so many of those ESPN commercials that make me laugh.
It just depends on your age group. Right now, 30 or not. If you're 30 and under, 28 and under, it was Wipeout. And if you're over that, then you recognize me from SportsCenter.
Best SportsCenter commercial that you did, which one was it? Is it the Mannings walking down the hall? Is it you were with Ricky Fowler, were you not?
Did Ricky Fowler. That was fun. Got my Mizzou mug, which was good. There's a bunch, so I'm going to go quick because you said that. The first one, which was great, the first one I'm in, it's with the band Bon Jovi. I'm there in the newsroom with Bon Jovi. Crazy. That's the first one. As a track guy, doing it with Usain Bolt was unbelievable.
That was a good one.
Yeah, and then raced him in the parking lot afterwards, which was even more fun. Sitting around in my underwear with a bunch of poker players was crazy. And then the one that doesn't get as much play was with Maria Sharapova. I did one with her. It's where I'm saving the seat for Stuart. And so as people come by, I'm like, no, I'm saving it for Stuart. And then she comes by and I'm like, have a seat. And then Stuart walks behind me like, what happened? But what was amazing is people have this idea. Here's Maria Sharapova. Okay. And she comes in and she is 6 whatever tall. She's more beautiful than you can even imagine. And she got a little bowling bag with a dog. And you're like, this is going to be a Diva Central thing. And I was closing on the house that I am sitting in right now. And I had to go sign papers. And I told the people at 2, I have to go. And these things run over and they're like, he's not going to leave. And at 2 o'clock, I said, I'm leaving. and I'll be back in, literally it was down the hill. I'll be back in 18 minutes. And Maria Sharapova was like, oh, you're building a house. How great. She couldn't have been nicer. Come back 18 minutes. Still happy. How you doing? How is it? It's great. I'm so, sure you want to come to the housewarming party. Like, she just couldn't have been better.
Wow.
And then when I went back the next day to pick up all the stuff, because I just signed it and left, the guy goes, I hope I didn't pull you away from anything. I said, no, I was just having lunch with Maria Sharapova. And so he's ha, 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 ha. And I went back in there a week or two later when we finally got all the deals done, and we were crossing the last I's and T's and making, and I brought him a picture of me and Maria Sharapova, and he's like, oh my God. And he bumped up my money market rate like by a quarter of a point. So like it was all worked out great. Gosh. But she was amazing in that you had this preconceived notion that she was going to be diva-ish, and she could not have been anything further from that. And further is what I mean, because farther is a different word.
I get that. I get that.
Looking for a guest speaker for your next event or annual conference? Kraig's message is inspiring and empowering. Visit CraigCannSpeak.com to learn more about his topics and find out about his green shoe experience. It's a day your people will talk about long after he's gone. So visit CraigCannSpeak.com and mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the show.
Those commercials, I mean, just watching the energy coming from you, it seemed like you got picked a lot. I mean, they leaned on you. Van Pelt got picked a lot too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
some of it is you just happen to be there. Some of it just had, like, I did a great one that gets played a bunch now every time they celebrate the anniversary of his death with Steve Irwin. And I forget who was supposed to do it, and they were on an overnight, and they're like, I just can't get up in the morning. And they said, okay, cool, Anderson, you're here. You want to do that? And I'm like, sure. You know, so sometimes they have them written for somebody, and the body's not there, and then you're the next guy in.
So knowing that and what you just shared comes across, and I always wanted, when I was a kid, there were a couple of things I wanted to be. If the sports gig didn't go as I had planned it to do, choreograph that, you know, at my earliest ages.
Perfect.
I wanted to be a stand-up comedian would be my second thing. But I really loved Johnny Carson. And then I loved Letterman. And I wanted a show, and I wanted a microphone like this where I could just lean there, you know, and just listen and talk and crack dumb jokes and entertain myself more than anything else. You're like the perfect game show host. And Wipeout, you were good. Did you ever think about doing that? Like, if they came to you and said, we want you to do Tattletales, we want you to do, you know, I mean, come on, let's go back and come up with some of the great shows like Wink Martindale and
Card Sharks.
Yes. You don't
name that
see
tune? That? No, not at all. And I didn't even really want to get into that one. And I have always thought, my mom has always said, like, yeah, you've always been such a funny kid. And I was not a class clown or a cut up, but I always thought I said funny stuff from the guy who was just a disruptor. So I've always thought I was kind of a funny person. I deflect with humor. I will lead with that. Then I worked with John Henson. I realized I'm not funny at all. Like professional comedians, like there is a different level of funny. And the example I use is if someone slipped on a banana peel, we could all say something funny. But if I just gave you a banana and said, here, I need 10 jokes in 30 minutes, like, what would you do? Like, I can't write that. And these guys will be like, hang on, I got 10, but I wrote 13 because I wanted to make sure that 10 of them were good. And so it's just a whole different level of craft and funny and like, it's just an amazing thing. But I don't know what my fallback position really would have been, Craig. The last job I had that was not in television, I worked at McDonald's.
Really?
So I'm reasonably sure I could go, because every once in a while when I eat at McDonald's, I still get mad. I'm like, wait, you put one pickle on a cheeseburger.
I thought it was
two. And there's two. Like, how do you miscount one? For that matter, how do you miscount two? But I still could go back, and I'd be a bang up at that. I still could run the grill. I worked at the one on campus at Missouri, across from the library.
The old bookstore?
Yeah, below the bookstore. And when it closed, I have one of those big wooden napkin holders that the guy sent me. It's sitting over here as well. But that was the last job I had. So like what else would you do? I don't know. I would have loved to have been an astronaut. Like that would have really, I was an astronaut baby. I had wallpaper everywhere. When I was a kid, I grew up in that era. So that was amazing. I can remember riding my bike home from a baseball practice one time to watch the Apollo Soyuz hookup. I went to do a meet in College Station once, and I flew into Houston, and I took my son with me at the time. He was in maybe eighth grade, and we went to NASA, and he's just like, okay. And I'm like, no, and he was like, okay, my dad is the biggest nerd I've ever met. Like, you want him to be proud of you. Like when they say, Dad, wow, you know LeBron James? And you're like, yeah. And then you take him to NASA and like, okay, I thought my dad was cool. My dad's a total nerd. He's a space geek. So yeah, I love Johnny Carson, loved Letterman, but I didn't ever see myself in that. And if they called me on Tattletales, no. And if they called me for another game show, no. Like that was a one-off. The people that run it, that did Wipeout, also did Fear Factor, and the guy who does it now is doing it's not Love Island, but it's like something on an island. And I always joke with these guys because they try, Henson, John Henson, he'd have this pilot go, and they've all been through this ringer. And I'm like, I don't know what you guys think about. Like, I came out, I did one pilot. The show got picked up. It ran for 8 years. It was a hit. I don't know what you guys are talking about with the struggles of Hollywood. It seems like it's really, seems easy enough to me. Like I'm batting 1,000. It's like, remember when Keegan Bradley had his second press conference at a major and they said, do you feel pressure, whatever? And he said something like, I don't know. I've won every one I've ever played in, because he won in Atlanta and he made that quip about that. Right. And I'm like, I was kind of the same way. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like Keegan Bradley. I've won every major I've ever played in. I don't know what the difficulty is. And then they want to punch you in the face.
Well, I had Chris Harrison.
That was a one-off, and I'm happy.
I had Chris Harrison on this program once upon a time, and I had Pat McGann, the comedian. Chris Harrison, and I, it's like, all right, final question tonight, when you're ready. I'm giving him and he's like, I get it, so you think you're kind of funny, and you'd love to do that, and The Bachelor and all these different shows. I think it's really cool that you got to do that. ESPN. All right, let's call it for what it is, John. I mean, I'm sure you feel about ESPN, maybe not how I feel about Golf Channel. And this is nothing, and I mean this, nothing against anybody that currently is on air there. But having been there from the beginning, original cast and crew, and amidst the talent that was there, and the way the brand was built, and we could use Scott Van Pelt, and I could go on down the line, Jennifer Mills, Brian Hammonds, Mike Ritz, Tom Nettle, down the line, Mark Lai, and the producers and the people behind the scene. It was beautiful. All right. A lot of hardworking people. It's not the same Golf Channel that it was back then. ESPN is not the same as it was when you were all doing all the commercials and every character. We all knew you all. Has it changed in your mind for the good? And how about the industry in and of itself, sports? It's a long question.
Yeah, I'm trying
to think, the answer can't be that long.
Because I really want to tell the story about Chris Harrison and I and some Oklahoma twin baton twirlers in Lubbock, Texas, but that's for another day.
Another podcast.
When we work together.
Or when you and I do our own podcast.
When I left and chatted some media people, because they kind of hinted at that, but they were like, as a good journalist, yours is sort of neutral. Theirs were sort of leading. I think they were looking for some sort of ESPN bashing. And I said, is it different?
Yeah,
It's totally a different place than I started in. But I'm sure when I came there, and ESPN at 79, I got there in 99, so it was only 20 years old. I'm sure at 99, it was different than when Bob Lee started in 79 and as Chris Berman. So that it is a different place. Totally. Yes, that is every place is different, right? The NFL is different 20 years from what was 20 years ago. All these things. So that part is a given. Change happens. You don't grow. You don't excel. You don't become what they were without that. So that's a given. Is it good or bad? So much of that depends on your situation. So this sounds bad. From what I knew, and when it became on my radar, and I'm like, okay, I find myself watching sports all the time, and that is a place I want to work. Is it different? Is it that? Yes. But I think, is it for the better? I would say no. But that is my opinion as a 59-year-old who consumes television different than my 22-year-old son does.
Yeah.
My son looks at ESPN and goes, it's fine. It's what I ever wanted. I want to go see games. It's there. I can still get it, and people complain about the price. I can still get it a lot cheaper than I can for one single parking pass to go to one event anytime over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I've ever seen him sit down and watch a full Sports Center. I don't know that I've
No.
ever seen him sit down and watch a full NBA game, and yet the kid knows everything about the NBA up, down, backwards, and sideways.
Right.
So has it changed for the better? Or has it changed for the worse? In my opinion, yes, but only because me as a consumer, I sit down and watch TV. I don't watch it on my phone. I'll look at a box score, but I still prefer to really go over it in the newspaper. That's the tactile thing that you read. So in
Right.
that regard, yeah, as it is for me, yes, as it is for the viewer, that most the consumer today, I don't think so. I think they get everything they want out of it, whether it's Sports Center or whether it's ESPN. Is it right now? We're very big on the SEC because that's the biggest thing, and we've got that coming this year. I say we because I still kind of invested in the place, obviously. So yeah, it is different, and the people that have come through, I was really lucky. You talk about you get to be on the, you were at the base of that pyramid that now has become Golf Channel. Like I came in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
but I was there to get with almost everybody that you needed to do a show with. Like I didn't do a show
Mm.
proper with Bob Lee, but I was around the general enough and got to fill in on a couple of times for outside the lines when he wasn't there.
Yeah, so
And
good.
I did a Super Bowl with Dan Patrick, which is one of those moments where I just went, I'm doing the Super Bowl on ESPN Sports Center after the Super Bowl with Dan Patrick. And you said that's one of the couple times where I just took a minute and went, wow, okay, I think things are going all right. And then I was lucky enough, if there was anything lucky out of the pandemic, we did very few shows, but I did one with Keith Olbermann, who was kind of the last stamp on my blackout bingo card because I had Charlie Steiner, I did Larry Beal, like all these people. I got there at the right spot. You know,
Kilborn?
no, didn't get the killer. Nope, he was
Okay.
gone. Killer was
Okay.
gone. But Ravage, like just most
Yeah.
everybody there of import of note, I was able to do a show with. It's kind of like our time
Right.
at Missouri. We got there at a really good time. We were there in time to get the shack before Chancellor
Yep.
Ewing burned it down in a horrible act of arson. We got to see Norm Stewart and a couple of good years. And
We got to
so
have on-campus parties. Okay, let's
got
call
to,
it for what it is, you
yeah,
know? I
on a
mean,
dry
come
campus.
on. On a dry
Anyway,
campus.
so I was really lucky in that regard. But yeah, it has changed. Um, I think in terms of, like I said, as I consume SportsCenter, or ESPN, it's not what it used to be, and it's not how I would do it.
Okay.
But I'm not so sure of how I would do it would fit the audience today. So, and that's one of those
Okay.
things as I go into school, go to Mizzou, is like, okay, I need to make sure that I am, while I'm 59 and there are lessons that can be learned and there are basics that will always be tenets that will be, that when it was Walter Williams or 200 years from now, you talked about writing, there's certain things aren't going to change. But I
Mm-hmm.
also have to sit down and look, okay, how is this going to be consumed now by these people that are sitting in front of me who are 19, 20, and 21
Right.
and their group? And that's going to be something I have to look at and make sure that I'm open to. Because right now I don't have social media. Never was on Twitter. Don't do any of those places. Part of that is because I don't think sorry, I've tangented. But part of that is I've always said Twitter I didn't like because I don't want to let mean people into my pocket, and I know you can shut stuff off. But more importantly, is like I'm not that creative. I'm not that smart. So if I have one really good thing to say, I need to save it for 11 o'clock when the
Mm,
people are paying their cable bill and not give it away for free on Twitter at 3 in the afternoon because I don't know if I'm going to come up with something between 3 and 11.
pretty good. That's a pretty good answer. Okay. Quick hit, fast answers. ESPN Sports Center host or full-time golf host in a tower. Full-time job.
I still take Sports Center.
Okay. ESPN Sports Center host or play-by-play voice of Missouri Tigers sports.
Sports Center
Full-time
only
job.
because I'm too invested anymore. I couldn't give the thing. I'd get mad or I would,
Yeah.
I'm too invested to be unbiased and give what needs to be done.
You'd be like Hawk Harrelson was with the White Sox and just start ripping everybody and he
Terrible.
couldn't
Would be
hold back.
awful.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I went to an Auburn game together against Missouri.
Yep.
We went to an LSU game together and a few others. College sports is huge.
Yeah.
Yes or no? business is going to really hurt it long term?
I think it's unkillable only and I use this at the opening of the NCAA track and field championships this year on the final day, is that in the end, college athletics are idiot proof. And that is, if you can just put Auburn and Alabama on the field and let them play, it's going to be fine. Long as they still trot out 11 in the burgundy helmets and 11 War Eagle guys, it will be fine. How it looks, the framing that we're going to put around it's going to change. How you may apply those guys, where you get those guys. Now it's a bidding war and all those other things. But I think on Saturday, since it's the SEC, when it's Saturday at 3:30 Eastern, and we trot those two teams out there, then it's idiot proof. But we're doing our best. We're doing our best to try and make it hard. How is that ever going to be a bad game on the floor?
Never.
In whether it's in on Faroe Field or whether it's at Allen Fieldhouse, which by the way, as everyone knows, is a dump. It's never going to be bad. By the way, one of the first things I did after I retired from SportsCenter, I got done because now I don't have to hold back. So the guy who coaches Kansas now, Lance Leipold, right? He's in my phone as former Wisconsin Whitewater coach because he's not there. And we did a podcast with him and we went back and forth and I did the whole hour without actually saying the name of the state or the university, right? It's like, listen, you coached at Buffalo, you D2, now you're at a Big 12 school, like the whole thing. And I texted him, I said, okay, I've retired. Now your shit is really in trouble because I'm coming after you. And I really want him to take the Washington job because he's really good. And I fear that they're going to be good. So that'll always be better.
My youngest daughter once tried to tell people in a group setting when she was considering school, and her older brother and sister went to Missouri. I brainwashed all three of them ultimately to go to Mizzou, but she said, when asked, where are you going to go, young lady? She said, I'm really considering the University of Kansas. Of course, everybody looks at her like, what?
Right.
And I said, wow, that's really impressive. Somebody asked what made you consider that, and she tried to play it off very straight, a very strong academic school and all these different things to be funny. Right. And I said, listen, I can just tell you that if you choose to do that, that could be really, really good for me. and she, of course, looks at me like, okay, now I've maybe messed this up. And I said, here's the thing. If you go to the University of Kansas, that will be the least amount of money I could ever pay for you to go to a college institution in the country. She said, why is that? I said, because I am not paying one dime for you to go to the University of Kansas. Okay. So now that we've gotten that out of the way for all of our Missouri friends that might be watching this, let's segue into this. All right. Couple of things before we go. You're going back to Missouri. It didn't matter if you were going to Rutgers for this conversation, but you're going back to Missouri to be a teacher, John, to go to the journalism school, to help broadcasters, maybe sportscasters. Why was that on your mind 4 years ago for your next?
So I have a long family history of educators. So I've always, liked that, respected that position. Some of my most influential people in my life were teachers or coaches. And it's funny, some coaches were more teachers than others. I love the football coach that goes, I'm a teacher first. And then I watch him and a guy jumps off sides and I watch him get in their face and humiliate him in front of the other thing. I'm like, you know what? I never had a teacher do that to me when I missed a math problem. So like I get you're a teacher, but sometimes I don't know that I agree with your method on how you handle that with goes, and yet, listen, I'm from Green Bay, right? Vince Lombardi yelled at people all the time and I'm like, we're good at that. So I see where it can be effective. And then I have really liked over the last 25 years, even before that, when I was in Tulsa, or Phoenix, when we had interns coming in, helping them, I'm like, wow, I know some things and I enjoy making this other person know and understand those things too and get better. And when we have, constant turnover at ESPN, sometimes you're like, I can't believe we got to tell this person again or this new person, whether it's further or farther, just dumb things. Hey, you want to sound smarter? Just say that, that pass was, further. And so I've always enjoyed that kind of a deal. And then as I've gotten deeper into it, I've had more chances. Hey, will you come speak to our class? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I like some of the questions I'm getting. Hey, can you jump into campus, Ball State? There's a wonderful guy named Chris Taylor, who has a wonderful program there. Will you come spend a day here? Yeah, I found that unbelievably exhilarating. And so I just realized that I kind of, I don't know, built for that, but I found that was really, I started to like that way more than the deadline pressure of 11 o'clock Eastern time. I'll let me help you, and you can have the deadline pressure. And then there was a great guy that taught at Missouri for 20 years. He was not there when you and I were there. He was after this. A guy named Greeley Kyle. But every intern that came through that we had that was at Mizzou spoke unbelievably lovingly and glowingly about Greeley Kyle and how he scared the crap out of him. Right? Like, oh my God, he was the hardest teacher I had, but the time he got done, he was great. Well, it turns out he now is up here at Amherst, an hour from me, hour and 15. So I called him one day, said, hey, and he had helped me. We had interactions when he was on campus, helping me choose interns to come out of ESPN. And I said, I'd love to just come sit in your classroom. I said, I don't want to teach in your classroom. I literally want to kind of almost audit the class, see what you do, how you do it. And I watched him, and I just admired what he did and how he did it, and how sometimes he would roar at a kid, and sometimes he put his arm around a kid, and the message got through to whoever that kid was in different ways. And gradually then it was like, hey, I want you to speak today. Hey, can you do this? Hey, can you take over my class for a day? Hey, my wife and I actually are going on our cruise for our 20th anniversary. Can you take my classes for 2 weeks? And I just decided that was a good fit. And then it sort of in a rush ended up on me, and I ended up in Missouri because I'll just make this quick nod. The first place I inquired that there was an opening that I actually heard from a Mizzou person was the University of Arkansas. And I explored that deeply, and they were the first person. I'm like, wow, they think I have something to offer. Like you're right. You always think you do. You're like, oh, I think I could do this, but you need the other party, right? To go.
That's right.
I think you can. And I'm like, wow, so they see value in what I have. So that was some positive reinforcement. And then in working around that, the time, the date, maybe the money didn't work out quite right. And then the Missouri thing came along separately. And for a lot of reasons, I'm going to be honest, the journalism was great, and I really want that. But Kraig, I don't know if you saw it. I'll send it to you. We have a brand new indoor track at Missouri. They just opened it. Okay, so I need to go back and be there for that too. I ran a lot of laps at Hearns that I need to be there for that more than anything. I got to see the new track.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of pride in you going back there, and I'm just going to say this for the listeners and viewers of watching this. They couldn't have picked a better guy to start to lead a program and take it in a different direction and maybe add something that it didn't have before than you. I think that's awesome. Legacy is important. Before I let you go, Wikipedia. Okay. I've got a Wikipedia page. I don't do anything with it. Obviously you don't do anything with yours, but if you could write yours and you were kind of in charge of what you wanted people to know about you, legacy, etc., what would you put on there, John?
ESPN, by the way, encouraged you every once in a while, the PR people, go look at stuff like that, because you're like, oh, that seems vain. But they're like, what if they say stuff on there that's not true? You should monitor it a little bit about yourself. Okay. For instance, I was not born in Peru, which for a while it said I was born in Peru. I had some guy had me on their show. He goes, so you were born in Peru? And I'm like, no, I was not. What would I put on there? I'm not really great at self-reflection in that regard, because I feel like writing that seems almost like, what would you write on your tombstone? Or, here lies beloved dad, good dad, father, and journalist, in some of that regard. So I don't know that I'm.
But you said ESPN was basically your brand, and yet you're pivoting.
And yet you're pivoting. And yet what's funny is, I want to put this in because you'll you'll know this, you know exactly how this is. I don't know if it resonates with our viewers, but I know this speaks to you. The 25 years at ESPN is what got me hired at ESPN or at Mizzou. That's cool. I can almost guarantee it will be 50-50 or more. The things that I impart with them that are going to be more valuable were the 10 or 11 years I spent in local news when I was shooting my own stuff, editing my own stuff, figuring out how to do a story on a quarter horse when the quarter horse had just been shipped to Albuquerque and you're in the middle of Oklahoma and you got to figure out what the story is, how to get a score from a podunk town in the third quarter by calling the guy at the drive-through or the third window at the Dairy Queen because he can see the scoreboard. Like, I think there are lessons in there that are going to be way, way, way more instrumental in helping young journalists than 25 years at ESPN. Those will be great war stories. Yep, I was on set with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and blah, blah. Okay, great. But I don't know how that, there's way more to be done, on some of those other things and grinding out and finding stories and doing that. So I don't know what my Wikipedia page would be. Hopefully it was like I tell people, but my legacy at SportsCenter, I hope, is this. He did the show, right? The number of people whose Wikipedia page says was on SportsCenter. I'm like, you were on there like once, maybe twice. I don't know. But once you're on, you get to put it on your resume. Like, I hope people just remember I did the show. That'd be cool. And I hope they remember at the time, hopefully, that I was that they got the information they want. And by accident along the way, if you were entertained, great. Hopefully that is part of it, And then I would like to say, as you touched on, hopefully it's somewhere it says, you know what, he was a really good dad to his kids. He raised kids at this point, knock on wood, seem to be fairly productive adults at this point, I hope it says that he is kind of the same guy that was at Missouri, although, smarter and wiser, but at the core, he's still kind of this dude. I go back when I was back this summer to visit my son who was interning at a baseball team in Green Bay, right? Like, I just went and hung out with my 5 or 6 of my closest friends from high school. And we always laugh when they have the big 40-year reunion or the 35, and we haven't been able to go back now and then. Because the last one we were all at was like at 25. We all went, you realize like we could have convened this group in 5 minutes because we see each other all the time, the same people you want.
Right.
But we went and we laughed about the same stupid things we did and how we'd do them all over again because they were, stupid, but they were harmless. So hopefully that that just even at 59 and with a position that came with some, I don't know, notoriety is not the right word, but it came with some it was a recognizable position.
Yeah.
That I'm really just kind of the same dude that I always was. And that I think about sports the exact same way. And that literally, if I had the time, I would still copy William Contreras' batting average, the Brewer catcher, every week, and keep track of those things. I still revel when my Packer tickets come, even though they're now on my phone. But at the end of the year, they send you the actual. If you can opt in and get you can opt in and you can get what the tickets look like, because that was my favorite thing when my Packer tickets would come as a kid. Like all that stuff, all that same stuff at 59. I'm excited about the same stuff in sports that excited me when I was 9.
Yeah.
Right. Like cool. The same stuff that excited me at 9 excites me. Last night, my wife's like, there's preseason football on. Do you want to watch? I'm like, yeah. Like nobody's going to play. I know. That'll be great. But, but that helps because at some point, like somebody's going to get hurt and the third team guy for the Colts is going to be in. And I'm going to have said, oh, I watched that guy in the preseason.
That's right.
I just saw him play. So I think if anything, maybe that's it. Here he was. He did SportsCenter. He loves his kids. They turned out okay. And the same things he loved about sports at 9, he loves at 59. And I'm pretty sure I'll love him at 69.
The journey continues for you. I appreciate the time. We've been friends for a long time. You're going to add a lot in the next phase of your career. This show is called Tracks to Success. Your track's been amazing, and the success will roll on. I will see you this fall and at many other games on campus. I appreciate the time. Great chat.
Real quick, answer me this. Why isn't when I call all my friends and say, how come you're not coming to the UMass game? Why can I not draw a crowd? Everyone wants to go to Auburn. Everybody wants to go to LSU. Nobody wants to come to the UMass game. I'm like, wait, my friends, you're awful people.
Yeah. Well, I could answer that question, but I'm trying to increase viewership in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Sadly, I think it's like that thing. I know the answer to that. So I appreciate you having me, man. Always good to talk. And as you know, I'll be leaning on you because I feel like you're way more prepared for this than I'm ever going to be. But good stuff.
Take care, man. Thanks. Time now for our closing segment. We call it Getting Ahead. My thoughts on helping you find your track to success. And it's brought to you by Ahead. If you're looking for the best in headwear, Ahead has you covered. From a robust collegiate collection with more than 30 universities to choose from, to styles featuring golf legends Palmer, Nicklaus, and Sorenstam, to fits for all 6 teams in the new TGL Golf League, visit AheadUSAShop.com. That's AheadUSAShop.com and use code TTS at checkout. Receive 20% off your purchase. That's AheadUSAShop.com and code TTS for 20% off. I always love talking to John. We talked so long, I almost lost my voice. Here's some thoughts on John Anderson. He's more than just a great television anchor. He's a fabulous storyteller, as you can tell, and he's a really, really good writer. And that's the topic that I want to talk about as we focus on you and your career and getting ahead. I want you to think about writing and starting to write down the things that happen in your career, in your journey, in your tracks to success. Chart your course. Write down the things at each stop that are memorable to you. Write down the person who influenced you most, the influence that you believe you had, the greatest success you had in that job, or perhaps the biggest failure and what you learned from it. Most importantly, the legacy you left behind, hoping that you did so. And that sort of stuff is all about what makes your story. And then I would say once you've done that, practice presenting it. So when somebody says, what's your story, or give me your background, or talk about your journey, you're able to share that. If you want to get ahead, to me, being a master storyteller is one of the fastest ways. Master storytellers, they create legions of followers, and people start talking about you because you can share and present your journey. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Kraig Kann. Until next time, let's stay connected.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and Kraig's thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. Find it wherever you get your podcasts and on the Kraig Kann YouTube channel and KraigCannSpeak.com.